Hello, everyone, and welcome to Black Bedtime Stories with your greatest Sam Adams. Tonight's story is about Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was an American abolitionist and women's rights activist. Now, Truth was born in Sojourner, New York, but escaped with her infant daughter to freedom in 1826. After going to court to recover her son in 1828, she became the first Black woman to win such a case against a white man. Sojourner Truth was born Isabella Baumfree in 1797 to James and Elizabeth Baumfree, slave parents in Ulster County, New York. Around age 9, she was sold at a slave auction to John Neely for $100 along with a flock of sheep. Now, Neely was a cruel and violent slave master who beat young Sojourner regularly. Now, she was sold 2 more times by age 13 and ultimately ended up at the West Park, New York home of John Dumont and his second wife, Elizabeth. Around age 18, Isabella fell in love with a slave named Robert from a nearby farm, but the couple was not allowed to marry since they had separate owners. Instead, Isabella was forced to marry another slave owned by Dumont named Thomas. She eventually bore 5 children: James, Diana, Peter, Elizabeth, and Sophia. Now, at the turn of the 19th century, New York started legislation for emancipation, but it would take over 2 decades for that to happen and for the liberation of all the slaves in the state. In the meantime, Dumont promised Isabella he'd grant her freedom on July 4th, 1826, if she would just do well and be faithful. Now, when the date arrived, he had a change of heart and refused to let her go. She was so angry, but she felt her obligation to Dumont had been met. So she escaped his clutches as fast as her 6-foot-tall frame could walk away. Her infant daughter in tow, she later said, "I did not run off, for I thought that would be wicked to run off. But I walked off, believing that I had done all right." It must have been a gut-wrenching choice that she left her other children behind because they were still legally bound by Dumont. Isabella made her way to New Paltz, New York, where she and her daughter were taken in by Isaac and Maria Van Wagenen. When Dumont came to reclaim his property, the Van Wagenens offered to buy Isabella's services from him for $20 until the New York anti-slavery law emancipating all slaves took effect in 1826. 1827 is when the emancipation of all slaves in New York took effect. Dumont agreed. Now, after the New York anti-slavery law was passed, Dumont illegally sold Isabella's 5-year-old son, Peter. With the help of the Van Wagenens, she filed a lawsuit to get him back. Months later, Isabella won her case and regained custody of her son. She was the first Black woman to sue a white man in the United States courts and win. Now, the Van Wagenens had a profound impact on Isabella's spirituality, and she became a fervent Christian. In 1829, she moved to New York City with Peter to work as a housekeeper for evangelist preacher Elijah Pearson. She left Pearson 3 years later to work for another preacher, Robert Matthews. When Elijah Pearson died, Isabella and Matthews were accused of poisoning him and of theft, but were eventually acquitted. Living among people of faith only strengthened Isabella's devoutness to Christianity and her desire to preach and win converts. In 1843, with what she believed was her religious obligation to go forth and speak the truth, she changed her name to Sojourner Truth and embarked on a journey to preach the gospel and speak out against slavery and oppression. What do we learn from the life of Sojourner Truth? We learn the only way you lose is to quit. The only way to fail is to quit. You have not failed as long as you are still going. The universe will reward your perseverance. Sojourner Truth, a Black icon. Good night, all.